let's move on to your observations. They're keenly looked forward to right across the nation. A lot of clubs tuning in right now. Your observations of the week.
Yeah, so I think now that we're past the bye rounds, and we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, that you've probably got a couple of weeks to get your game in order until
the runway.
Correct. So, and first and foremost, there's so much to look at each and every week and across the season. But we keep coming back to the defensive profile, and if you haven't got your defence in good shape, history says that the chance of success come the end of the season is going to be pretty slim. So I sort of tend to revert to it as the balance of defence. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is the combination of being able to restrict inside 50s and then be able to restrict the opposition scoring once they go inside 50. So over the last 17 years, 14 of the 17 premiers have ranked top 6 in both. Mm-hmm. So top 6 for denying entries and then top 6 once the ball goes inside 50. So that balance is perfect. And the reason why I'm so big on it is that you think of finals and the chances of being able to restrict the best teams in the competition for 3 or 4 finals in the row are pretty slim. So if you think back to first week of finals last year, Geelong give up 56 entries against Collingwood, but because their defensive structure in their D50 was so strong, they're able to hold on. Mm. Sydney give up 56 entries to Melbourne in the first final last year, but again, because they're so strong behind the ball, they're able to hold on. Right now, there's only 2 teams in the competition that rank top 6 in both areas. So top 6 for denying and top 6 for restricting. And they're probably going to surprise. One's Port and the other one's Melbourne. So we don't see Collingwood in there at the moment, and I'll get into Collingwood a little bit later on.
I'm looking forward to that, Hoyney, because you haven't been caught up in the win-loss with the Pies, have you?
No, I haven't, and I still think that their best is the best. Don't get me wrong, but their profile isn't perfect, and I think they know that as well, and that's okay. So the 3 exceptions to the rule over the 17 years is Richmond in 2020, but that defensive profile tightened up in the last 6 weeks of the home and away season. The Swans in 2012, who were more a team that sort of retreated and then launched from the back half. And then Hawthorn in 2008, who introduced the Clarko cluster and just completely did it a totally different way. So they're the only 3 teams that that are the exception to the rule over the last 17 years. So just being able to get that balance right is going to be key for pretty much 16 other teams at the moment that are actually trying to strike that balance.
How did Fremantle defend on the weekend, because they clearly put in their best effort for a period of time? Did that game come anywhere near to being a better finals-like profile?
No, it didn't. It was a good win, don't get me wrong, but they've still got a long way to go, I think, in terms of sort of developing that sustainable brand that's going to hold them up. Hopefully come September for them.
Hoyney's with us. Let's work our way through his 7 main talking points of the round. And you want to speak about the players doing maximum damage.
Yeah, so we talk a lot on this show, don't we, about the impact in matches, not the disposals, the impact that you're actually having from them.
Who's winning the game for you?
Correct, from those disposals. So one of the absolute go-to measures is how often you're actually turning a chain that you're involved in into a score, if you like. So we take away the forwards. They're always high up in terms of being able to turn their possession into a score. So we look at all the other players in the competition outside of those permanent forwards, if you like. So Zach Bailey at the moment is the most impactful player in the game in terms of turning his possession into scores. So 39% of the time he's involved in a chain, Brisbane are scoring, number 1 in the competition.
Has his movement into the middle of the ground helped a lot for Brisbane?
Well, I think this is going to be a fascination in terms of watching where that magnet is actually put for the remainder of the season.
So McCluggage went out, he went in.
Well, yeah, so we saw the impact that he had against the Swans 2 weeks ago by actually playing more of an inside role, 11 score involvements that day. He was a little bit quieter against St Kilda on the weekend. But I think that magnet moving forward for Brisbane is going to be key, because I think he is their sort of point of difference, and he's able to sort of balance up that midfield with Dunkley and Neil sort of doing the grunt work, and then him being able to actually sort of really separate the game, if you like. There's a couple of surprises in here as well. So Ben Keys at the moment is actually going okay. I mean, his game against Nick Dacos on the weekend, I actually thought that was actually quite fascinating watching them actually go head to head, because he actually did quite quite a lot of strong work offensively himself, Ben Keys on the weekend, but clearly, Nick Dacos actually separated the game going through there. Taylor Adams' role across the half forward, sort of mid half forward role, so 36% of the time he's involved in a chain. Collingwood are scoring. We mentioned Gerard Caldwell on this show probably about round 4 or 5. He's high up in this area. And the other one that's a bit of a point of difference is Luke Jackson. So Luke Jackson's game on the weekend, I think that was one of those sort of special games on the weekend where his first 7 disposals, 6 of them resulted in scores as well. So just a couple of players there just to keep an eye on in terms of their impact and their ability to be able to transfer scores on the scoreboard.
Next week, Hoyney, I'm going to ask you about the players that get a stack of it, but don't have a good hit rate of actually turning that stack of possession into scores.
I was going to go Bombers, with that tonight too, Kane, so I'm glad I actually held off.
Just hold fire on that one. We'll get that from you next week. More positive tonight, which I don't mind. Let's talk about the Bombers.
Yeah, so Essendon are a really interesting watch for me, and I've mentioned them, a little bit on this show throughout the year. And when they actually do have possession of the ball this year, they're probably one of the most potent teams in the competition. Have been able to turn their chains into a score. They just don't win the ball back as often as what some teams do. But when they do win it, there's probably no other team in the competition, probably other than Port Adelaide, that's as damaging with ball in hand. But the way that they're playing at the moment is just an interesting profile. So the first 25 minutes of the game against Fremantle on the weekend, they take 39 marks and the game is completely on their terms. They had 8 shots to 4. They led the game by 7 points. Probably should have been in front by a little bit more, to be honest. But then the next 100 minutes when Fremantle were able to take away their marking game, they only took 60 marks in the last 100 minutes of the game. And they were outscored by 39 points in that period. And in that 100 minutes, they're only able to generate 29 entries in 100 minutes of footy, which is such a low number on the back of not being able to control the game, from a marking sense. And that's always just a little bit of a watch sort of, come finals time, because, again, the chances of you being able to take 110, 120 marks, for 3 or 4 finals in a row is probably pretty slim. The interesting aspect to me is that they do have a list profile that's sort of, that does have speed, that does have, elite ball users, that they might be able to sort of unleash this a little bit more. So, surprisingly, over the last 6 weeks, when they actually do take under 25 marks or less, their actual, their ability to be able to turn those possessions into a score so high as well. So, it is a bit of a learning phase, I think, for Essendon supporters this year and Essendon, the footy club themselves under Brad Scott, and they've done a lot right this year. I just wonder over the next 4 or 5 weeks whether or not we see anything change with this method moving forward, because it's it is an interesting watch, and whether or not it's actually going to be sustainable over the next 2 months is interesting.
I'll be looking forward to seeing how it evolves over the next 12 months, because I'm not sure Brad Scott came in with, the ultimate blueprint on how he wants to play. He was it was a seek and search mission.
Absolutely.
And I think looking now what he's got and what he can do, I think he can evolve his ultimate match plan. Just going back to Zach Bailey, he was a high draft pick 15. It was a pretty handy year that year for them. It's amazing these sides that are in the top 4 always have a year or 2 years where they go bang, bang, bang. They got Cam Rayner at 1, Zach Bailey at 15, and Brandon Starcevic at pick 18. So those 3 guys, and Jack Payne actually, national draft pick 54. You got to get some winners in the 50s if you're going to jump up the ladder, and that's the challenge for West Coast and everybody else down the bottom of the ladder.
Yeah, and that was off the back of the McCluggage and Berry draft, probably 2 or 3 years before that as well. So it's amazing what a couple of good drafts can actually do for you.
All right, let's move on. You've spoken about the Bombers and now the Dockers.
Yeah, so as I touched on before, sort of, what Fremantle are doing at the moment, they're really sort of, strong in one asset of the game. So, and that being the stoppage game.
Yep.
So, but where they're actually struggling at the moment is their turnover game at the moment. So they've, so over the last 6 weeks, they've generated the 4th fewest points of any team from turnover. And the reason why that is a concern, and I keep coming back to it, is that you have double the opportunities per game to score from turnover than what you do from clearance. So history says that you need to be strong in the turnover game. But just park that to one side at the moment. Their stoppage game is so strong, and it's off the back of largely Sean Darcy. So Darcy, over the last 5 weeks, he's pretty much only played 2 games because he was, I think he was out in the first 15, 20 minutes against Melbourne that day. So in 2 games, and this is actually quite remarkable, he's generated 49 points from stoppage whether that be through his immediate ruck work or his actual,
clearance?
Correct. His own clearance as well. 49 points. So that's extraordinary. That's by far and away number one in the competition as a per game sort of ratio at the moment. So his inclusion on the weekend sort of goes hand in hand to their clearance dominance at the moment. But just getting back to their actual overall profile, so half of their score over a 6-week period has come from stoppage. Just compare that to Collingwood, who, as I said, probably the best team in the competition at the moment. Only 30% of their score comes from stoppage. So their ability to play that transition game, Collingwood, is up there with the best. Fremantle's ability to be able to play that transition game at the moment's got a fair way to go.
So let me apply the Professor Julius Sumner Miller test. Why is it so?
Why is it so?
That they can't get they can't get turnover goals.
So I don't think, at the moment, I mean, you look behind the footy, and this is where it's an interesting sort of watch for me in terms of what they do with Brennan Cox. So, we talk a lot about you have to have that elite gun interceptor behind the ball, and that then just generates so much counter-attack for you offensively. So think about Darcy Moore. So Darcy Moore's taken 56 intercept marks this year. Only Charlie Ballard has taken more. Fremantle's number one man is Brennan Cox, and he's taken 32. 32 intercept marks as your number one rank compared to Darcy Moore, who's taken 56. They don't have that roadblock behind the ball, and I think...
Well, they do have it.
But
they've got the capacity to have it because Brennan Cox is a potential All-Australian centre-half back.
Yeah, so what they do with that magnet for me is the watch. So against Geelong a couple of weeks ago, we saw Luke Ryan play more of the defensive role on Jeremy Cameron that day and did a really good job. And then Brennan Cox was able to be sort of freed up, and they played the transition game okay that day. So whether or not they have to move Luke Ryan to become, their second key defender to free up, Brennan Cox to be able to play, that roadblock high intercept role to then be able to generate so much counter attack. That to me is, I think, worthy of discussion for Fremantle because, as I said, if you don't have it, it really does impact your transition game, both offensively and defensively.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Like Melbourne when they got Lever over, and when Lever had a good
Changes
year and
everything.
a bad year. Anyway, Lawrence is putting us under the pump, Kane. Sorry.
He is. Let's move on to Collingwood. Couldn't believe they conceded 7 goals in the third quarter to 0, Hoyney. What did that game against Adelaide tell us?
So, again, probably Collingwood supporters are going to come from me left, right and centre here after this, but that's okay. But what we're just trying to do with Collingwood is just work out how you can beat them. Because, as I said, I think they are the best team in the competition. But you just got to try and work out how you can actually go about, sort of denying what they want and be able to see if there are any chinks in the armour. And it is hard when they do rank top 3 in the clearance game and the turnover game. So their profile is in good shape. But we keep coming back to probably the only way that you can beat them is in that contest ground ball phase, if you like, because they do outnumber at the source. And if you do win that initial phase, they are so aggressive defensively that they then give you a chance in their D50. Hence why they don't rank top 6 in both inside 50s conceded and restricting the opposition from scoring. So Collingwood are the hardest team to generate an inside 50 against. Tick. But when you get it inside 50, they're the 7th easiest team to score against. Right. That's because they are so aggressive in what they do. So if you get ahead of the game and you get ahead of the ball, quite often you're actually, find
some holes.
Correct, and have more numbers ahead of the ball. So if you think back to that third quarter, Adelaide won the ground ball number 23-9. So, we don't often reference the full number, but Collingwood winning 9 ground balls for a quarter. It was the second fewest of any team in any quarter this year. So they were completely denied. And then off the back of that, 7 goals come from 15 entries because they've actually won that ball that then creates such a good look ahead of the ball. And, across the whole season, they are number 3 in terms of their ground ball capabilities in the midfield zone, if you like. So this isn't a weakness as a collective. Yep. It's just been at times, in quarters this year where teams have been able to score against them, and it's largely been off the back of that phase in particular. So you have to take your opportunity around. It's easier said than done, but once you do take your opportunity, they do give you a sniff ahead of the ball.
Yeah, I think the most memorable one this year was when Brisbane assaulted them.
Yeah,
up
in
at
the
the
second quarter, exactly the same phase. So it is easier said than done, but I think if you're looking as an opposition team in terms of how you actually beat Collingwood, that is the absolute number one thing that you actually need to focus on. If you do win it, you get a chance. If you don't, you're in all sorts.
What about their opposition?
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk, and rightly so, around that these two teams play sort of similar brands of footy, if you like, and they do. And the numbers from the weekend are actually quite stark: 369 disposals to 366. Both teams took 87 marks. Both teams had 155 or thereabouts, in the handball number. But their handball game is so different. So Collingwood gained 550 metres from hands.
Yep.
Adelaide only gained 56 metres from hands. So Adelaide are happy to go back to then go forward. Collingwood are just all out attack. So across the whole season, no teams gained more metres from hand than what Collingwood do, and Adelaide have gained the second fewest metres from hand, across the whole competition. But the interesting thing for me in that first half, and Kane, I know you were there on Sunday, I thought in the first half they had some opportunities to actually really sort of, capitalise against Collingwood. So in the first half, they have 10 shots at goal from the corridor zone, kick 3. In the second half, they have 10 shots again from the corridor zone, kick 7. So sometimes we try and look for real absolute specifics in terms of what happened. And yes, they dominated the ground ball number in that third quarter. But the accuracy component, at halftime, we had Adelaide behind by only 1 point on the expected score. So they actually weren't going as bad as what the actual scoreboard actually said. And then they were able to take their chances in the third quarter.
Will they make the 8?
Adelaide, yeah, I think they'll make the 8, yeah.
Ooh, all right, big call from Hoyney. At this time, each and every Tuesday, we play a little game called Guess Who. In 30 seconds, give us the clue, if you can, Hoyney.
So who was this team 2 years ago over a 6-week period that had this profile? They were 15th for points scored. They scored 41% of the time they went inside 50. They were 18th for accuracy, but they generated the 7th most shots of any team in the competition. They just couldn't convert. Who was that team?
2 years ago?
2 years ago.
Right,
15th for scoring, 18th for accuracy. Who was that team? So a 6-week period in 2021, they were 15th for scoring. They were 18th for accuracy despite having the 7th most shots at goal. Who was that
right,
team?
A few people having a crack. Was it the Tigers? It was the Pies? Was it Port? Travis asked whether it was the Bulldogs. I don't believe it was either of those. Gerard, you've probably got the answer.
No, I haven't got the answer. I just threw one at him, and he said it was a good get, but I suspect it's not correct. Port Adelaide was my pick.
He interrogates for 5 minutes during the ad break every time, Kane, but he hasn't got that one right.
It was Melbourne, surely.
It was Melbourne. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up, so rounds 13 to 19 in 2021 compared to what they've done over the last 6 weeks. Absolutely fascinating. So 15th for scoring in that 6-week period in 2021. They're 16th in this 6-week period in 2022. They scored from 41% of their entries in 2021. They scored from 41% of their entries over the last 6 weeks. Their expected accuracy, so they took the second hardest shots at goal in 2021. They've taken the third hardest shots at goal in 2023. Their accuracy in 2021 in this 6-week period was the worst in the competition. Their accuracy in this 6-week period is the second worst in the competition. They took the 7th most shots in 2021. They've taken the 8th most shots in 2023. So the reason why I wanted to say this is because what they're doing defensively and contest-wise, we keep talking about this, is so strong. So strong. It was so strong up until the last quarter, obviously, against Geelong on the weekend. But things change quickly. Yeah, it changed really quickly by a couple of new magnets being thrown into the team in 2021. So Jake Bowie comes into the team in round 20 to play as that nice distributor sort of role, and then Ben Brown became the most targeted player for them in their last 7 matches. Across that campaign, they went to him 79 times, by far and away the most targeted forward for them, and he kicked 17 goals in that 7-game stretch. He's not there at the moment, and I should have had a look at this. I've got no idea how far away he is in terms of injury or form at the moment.
Somebody from Melbourne will let us know. I assumed he's playing in the twos.
Well, yeah, I should have had a look at it, but I haven't had a look at it. And then, so despite that offensive profile in that 6-7 week period in 2021, they then flicked the switch and then averaged 106 points a game in their final 7 weeks. Right. And their accuracy went from 40% or 35% to 51%. So we talked about it at round 9 this this year on the show, they were shooting the lights out from an accuracy perspective that was freakishly above expectation.
60%, wasn't it?
Correct. And now it's gone well below expectation over the last 6 weeks. But if things change, so on
Jocko's going to be under the pump.
Well, on Thursday night last week, if they had a kick to expectation, they're kicking almost 80 points, which isn't a bad return in really terrible conditions, if you like. Against Collingwood the week before, they should have kicked around 80 points against the hardest team in the competition to actually score. So I don't think things are as bad as what they actually seem at the moment.
Bowie had 27 playing for the Casey Demons on the weekend, 21 kicks, 6 handballs, 12 marks, 5 tackles in a nice victory against Geelong. That looks like good numbers and numbers worthy of a player who's ready to come back in. Also, Jake Melcham kicked 4 as well, so they've got some depth. Ben Brown had plenty of the footy, kicked a couple with 9 marks. So,
Kane, do you see any scenario where Melbourne drop a ruckman? Drop a ruckman and they bring Big Ben Brown in.
I think they're too stubborn to do that, but I definitely think it's worth considering. And Grundy would be the person that would miss out. Clearly, I don't see that it is working in its current form, but they're heavily invested in it. They would suggest that it is working, and sometimes when you make an investment like this, you're all in, and they are all in. We'll wait and see how long they can last together. But I'm with you, Hoyney. Melbourne are polarising for a lot of people. A lot of people are out. It's either black or white. Nah, Melbourne, no good. From what I see from Melbourne, I mean, they just beat Collingwood, and they went down to Geelong where no one wins hardly, and should have won that game if it wasn't for probably Geelong's desperation. So they're up to their eyeballs in the premiership. Don't worry about that. Each and every Tuesday we look at the players that the coaches missed, and we marry that up with Champion Data's analysis from the games. Hoyney, start with that game at Geelong.
Yeah, so we'll start with Mark Blicavs. So Mark Blicavs didn't get a vote from the coaches on the weekend. He was the 3rd highest rated player on the ground by our ratings, and that was actually his 3rd best game of the season.
I'm surprised at that because I thought even from sitting at home at the TV, he looked so important.
Yeah, so it was actually surprised. So it was what he was actually doing in terms of a ball-winning capability. So he had the 3rd most impact of any player from the round in terms of his ability to be able to win it and what he was able to do in that phase of the game. So he was fantastic.
Gary Rowan got 10, Stewart got 6, Petrarca 5, Close, Viney and Lever, but no steeplechaser.
Rowan was enormous, wasn't he?
Oh, he was massive.
Take us through the Friday night game. It was a boring one.
Yeah, it was a bit of a hard watch, wasn't it, actually? But
Funny woman, much better.
But this is actually a rare one. So I wonder how much the coaches actually looked at our ratings, because all 5 players that the coaches agreed on were the top 5 rated players on the ground by our ratings system. So Andrews, Sinclair, Neal, McInerney and Hipwood were our top 5 rated players on the ground, and they all got the coaches' votes from that game. So well done.
Right eventually.
Well done, Ross, and well done, Fags. So absolutely nailed it.
Well played, gentlemen. Swans and West Coast, anybody missing?
No, we skipped that game. That's just
everything's
irrelevant from that game.
Silly question from me. Who else you got?
That's actually just on that. That's actually now meant for us to actually introduce a filter. We're able to sort of filter out opponents. At the moment, because the numbers are actually a little bit misleading now across the competition, unfortunately.
So it's not only distorting the AFL ladder, it's distorting the Champion Data.
Yeah, well, I was looking forward to the bye rounds being able to actually get even numbers, and now this has actually thrown it. So anyway.
Who'd they miss in the Fremantle and Essendon game?
So Zach Merritt didn't get a vote from his 29 disposals, but we had him as the 2nd highest rated player on the ground. Only Sarong was rated higher. And then across the weekend, again with Zach Merritt, it's his ball use. So only Chad Warner had more impact through ball use in round 15 than what Zach Merritt did.
He was striking them so sweetly, particularly early in the game. He was just hitting them beautifully. Where does his kick rating sit amongst the best in the league, Hoyney?
He's well above expectation. I think he's about 4 or 5% above expectation, which puts him at about a top 20, top 25 kick in the competition. But, I'll be able to break that down for you a little bit later on too, Kane, because there's some absolute specifics in terms of what he's doing doing so well at the moment in that phase.
Nice.
Collingwood v Crows, where'd they stuff up the coaches?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a hard one at the moment when there's only 6 games to actually pick from. So they didn't actually get too much wrong in this. But Rory Laird, so we had him as the 5th highest rated player on the ground in this game. He didn't get a vote from the coaches. His ability to be able to impact the game through his ball-winning capabilities. So he had the 7th most impact of any player for the round in that phase. So 16 contested possessions, 10 ground balls, and 6 clearances. So he just continues on his wonderful profile in that phase of the game.
He's had such a fantastic 4 or 5 years, Kane. He hasn't been recognised at all Australian level.
No, he's a very good player, Gerard, but he hasn't been able to elevate himself into the conversation with the elite midfielders. That's how I see him. You'd love him in your team.
Yep.
He's a best and fairest winner. He's top 3 most years in their best and fairest. But when it comes to putting him up against Oliver and Petrarca and Neil and Butters this year and all of them that are multiple All-Australians, he just falls a little bit short. And that's okay, but it's just where he sits in the game. But that's not really a knock on him because All-Australian midfield is really difficult to make. Will Day went back to half-back, Hoyney, for most of that game.
Yeah, so this was interesting. So he was the highest rated player on the ground despite Hawthorn losing by whatever they did on the weekend. Didn't get a vote, which I actually understand that from the coaches. So not sort of really knocking it, but I thought it was a really good performance by Will Day. So he went down back at the 10-minute mark of the second quarter when they were starting to get ambushed. And he had 6 intercept possessions in that final 20-minute period of the quarter. And I think he was the reason why the scoreboard actually didn't blow out in that last 20 minutes. So Gold Coast had 16 entries in that final 20 minutes for only 1 goal. And I think, as I said, a lot of it was on the back of what Will Day was able to do. So he's just got such good balance in his game in terms of his ability to be able to impact the game through ball winning and ball use.
Well, if you're tall mid and got mobility, you should be able to play and dominate halfback.
Yeah, that's where he actually started his career behind the ball, and he's now gone in to prove himself to be one of the better midfielders on their list. Yeah, so just having a look at the gem to start with, and so it's an interesting debate now for the Blues in terms of what they do with the 2 rucks.
Okay.
So when Pittonet attends a ruck contest, Carlton win the clearance 7% more often than their opposition. So a really good return. Mm-hmm. When De Koning attends a ruck contest, they lose the clearance 7% more often than their opposition. So that's a gap of 14% between the 2 rucks. Yep. That's the second biggest gap on record that we've seen between one ruck to the second ruck within a club over our time.
Is there a butt here? Is there a butt on scores? No.
No, I haven't gone into the scores just yet. We've just got to just touch the surface here at the moment. So Pittonet, sort of getting that 3-4 year contract sort of raised a few eyebrows. Yes. Having a look at this, you can understand why, and then what they do with De Koning is going to be interesting because his ruck returns, so far this year have been quite disappointing based off that.
All right, so was that your horror as well?
And then, no, that was a bit of a positive there for
that's
for
the
Mark.
most horrific positive he's
had.
had.
For Mark Pittonet. Just giving Mark Pittonet a little bit of a
hang on, did I miss it?
All the clubs that are throwing $1 million at TDK, they're very flat.
And then the horror is the Saints at the moment, and sort of we saw Harris Andrews have an absolute field day against them. On Friday night, took 9 intercept marks, at 7 intercept marks at half-time, was on track for the world record. So far this year, St Kilda are conceding 19 intercept marks per game. That's the most on record. We've never seen a team concede more than 17 a game, and that was Adelaide and Gold Coast in 2021. They're conceding 19 at the moment. So there's a fair bit of room for improvement there for St Kilda, and room for improvement they need if they're going to make the finals. 8? I've got my doubts on them at the moment. If you have a look at their profile at the moment, Kane, it's not a great profile. I know they'll win this week, but big picture wise, they've got some work to do.
Hoyney, we did miss out on one of your 7 main talking points. A lot of people text through and said we're tuning in for 7, not for 6. So there's a player position impact you'd like to discuss. Yeah,
so just having a look at some players that are playing dual positions at the moment. So whether that's a mid forward role, a defender mid role, key forward, key back role, whatever it might be, and having a look at the impact that they're having in one position compared to another. So Caleb Daniel at the moment, his impact as a forward, he's the most impactful forward in the competition, but he's only playing 548 minutes as a forward this year. When he goes into the midfield, he's performing well below expectation.
Okay.
But as a forward, performing miles above expectation. Jack Sinclair, he's the tricky magnet for me for St Kilda. As a back, performing miles above expectation. As a mid, performing above expectations still, like we saw on the weekend, but nowhere near to the level like he does behind the ball. So, yeah, so what they do with that magnet's going to be interesting. When Shy Bolton plays an attack, performing miles above expectation. As a mid, still going really well as a midfielder, but nowhere near to the levels as what he's doing as a forward 50 player. And then the other one is Jaden Short. So I think the Jaden Short magnet, moving to down back has been a significant one. He's performing well above expectation as a defender. When he was playing that mid role, he was actually performing below expectation as a midfielder there at the moment. So they're just a couple of players just to keep an eye on in terms of what they actually do with those magnets moving forward. We keep going through the list. There's a truckload of them, but just picking a few out at the moment.
All right, let's get through a couple of these listener questions that have been sitting there. Can you ask Hoyney if he has any stats on how well Gold Coast profile stacks up at Metricon compared to other grounds? Can they beat the Pies this weekend?
Yeah, so we come back to what we said before about Collingwood. If you're going to get Collingwood, you've got to get them in the ground ball phase at the moment to give yourself a chance. That is Gold Coast strength. They are a team that play a contest-to-contest brand, and if they're able to get on top of Collingwood in that phase, it's going to give them a chance inside 50. They're one of the more efficient teams in the competition, Gold Coast, when they do get it inside 50. And as we touched on with Collingwood, that's a little bit of a watch there at the moment. So that is their only chance against Collingwood this week.
Right. G'day, boys. Great to hear Hoyney mention Taylor Adams, as no one else does. No injuries, continuity and staring undercover in my eyes, taking big scalps head-to-head. Also, with some recognition for your man. Who was the better, higher-rated player between Jordan Dawson and Nick Dacos on Sunday, Hoyney?
Jordan Dawson, Kane, but by the smallest possible margin. So the difference between the two was, as I said, it doesn't get any smaller than that. So just both absolutely superb on the weekend.
Hoyney, does champion data take into effect? I know you do a lot of things well. Do you take into consideration players being sick or playing through an injury, Hoyney?
That's an interesting one, G. But no, we don't, unfortunately. So no, we don't get that feedback.
Neither does anybody else.
No, we don't.
Matt wants to know which team outside the top four has the strongest finals footy profile right now.
So right now, it would be Adelaide at the moment in terms of what they're actually doing, and then the other one just to watch at the moment is Richmond. So Richmond, in terms of what they're doing defensively, we keep talking about the defensive profile being first and foremost. That is their absolute number one strength at the moment and has been across the season. So they're the one to watch.
Do you give Giants any chance of beating Melbourne?
No, I give them a chance, but a very small chance. As I said, and I think Kane's a bit with me at the moment. I'm sort of pretty bullish still on Melbourne at the moment. So
do you give Essendon any chance of breaking the Warren Treadray reverse curse?
No, well, you got to give them a chance. They are dangerous offensively, and when they get ball in hand. So if Port Adelaide are off defensively, I think Essendon will get them. But if Port Adelaide are on, I'll be surprised if Essendon do beat them.
Hoyney, you mentioned Hipwood in round 3 was the worst rated player in the competition. How much has he improved?
His game on the weekend, that was his highest rated game in 4 years. Wow. But take out that performance, he's still performing well below expectation for his position this year. But he isn't the lowest rated player in the competition anymore like he was.
I noticed that Lockie Neal's kicking has improved almost to 100% since you cooked him 2 weeks ago. Do you think the message might have got through?
He said, did I cook it? I did cop it for that. I'll give you the tip. But no, his last 2 weeks with ball in hand has been absolutely superb.
Yeah, I did the game 2 weeks ago, and I swear when he hit a target, he said, up you, Hoyney, again.
There's been a few Brisbane players that have done that this year.
Yeah, there's a few that have done it to me as well. Don't worry about that, Hoyney. We're in it together. Mortimer asks a good question. If Port Adelaide and Melbourne are the only 2 teams in the top 6 for both offence and defence, how's the top 8 looking then, Hoyney, in terms of who else is in the mix?
So Brisbane are very close. So Brisbane are 3rd for conceding entries and 7th for conceding a score once they go in. And the Dogs are also really close as well. They're top 6 for conceding entries, and then they're 8th for conceding a score once they go in. So they're the 2 that are really close to actually getting into that bracket at the moment. So yeah, the interesting one is Collingwood. I mean, Collingwood could be the 4th team to buck the trend, but that's the phase of the game at the moment. That is the interesting watch.
There's a nervous Sainter that just threw up all over their dinner because you had them outside of the 8, so you've just ruined their night. And was Sydney's win last week the most technically perfect of any team this year? It'd be hard to go past it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, that's impossible to go. It's impossible to go past that. So it's going to be interesting to see what they actually do on Friday night against Geelong. I mean, if you're Sydney on Friday night, you're just purely focusing on the clearance game. That's where Geelong have absolutely destroyed them for 2 matches in a row. So that's the key focus for them.